It's all about safety. So trauma, whether it's what we call like a big T traumatic event, like a single big event, or whether it's just being bullied as a kid in school or being ignored by your parents in certain desperate situations and things like that, those are all traumatic events that build up over time, and they effectively train our bodies to to perceive threat from our environment when there is an early threat, and to not feel safe.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Thrive State Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. V, triple board certified MD and performance and longevity expert. Welcome in, welcome back. I've got such an amazing show and episode for you today because we learn about what is causing the mental health and chronic disease epidemic. One being our, dysregulated nervous system and state. We're constantly in this state of flight or flight, not even knowing that we are in it. We're not meant to be built in that way. Today, I bring a guest that brings in the concept of trauma in talking about our dysregulated nervous systems and our propensity to potentially have chronic disease in the mental space. And so you're really going to want to tune in, because if you can recognize dysregulation in you, if you can recognize stress in you, and if you can pick up the techniques, both free and both potentially in the technology space, to be able to put you more at ease, you're going to have new access to health, longevity, happiness in your life. Now, before we get into the podcast, I want to thank everybody who's been a loyal listener for allowing the show to grow. I thank you so much. And if you're new to this, please subscribe to the show, engage with the show with your comments, leave us a 5-star review wherever podcasts are heard to really help the show grow. We truly appreciate everybody's help in the past. We continue to be very, very grateful for our loyal listenership. If you haven't already, pick up a copy of the second edition of Thrive State. That new, expanded, updated edition talks a little bit about what we'll be talking about today, which is the default mode network, a primitive part of our nervous system that potentially has patterns that drive up the stress response and also put us in the propensity of us getting chronic disease and not being our best selves. You can pick a copy up at thrivestatebook.com. As my guest today, I have Dr. David Rabin. He's a board-certified psychiatrist, neuroscientist, and co-founder of Apollo Neuro. He's an inventor who's been studying the impact of chronic stress in humans for over 15 years. He is the co-founder and chief innovation officer at Apollo Neurosciences. Now, in addition to focusing on integration therapy, plant and natural medicines, couples therapy, and medical-assisted psychotherapy, Dr. Rabin specializes in the treatment-resistant mental illnesses, including depression, anxiety, PTSD, psychosomatic disorders, personality disorders, chronic pain disorders, the list goes on. He's an expert that is fascinated by consciousness and our inherent ability to heal ourselves from injury and illness. His research also focuses on clinical translation of non-invasive therapies for patients with treatment-resistant illnesses like PTSD and substance use disorders. We dive into the neuroscience, we dive into medicine, we dive into life in today's conversations. Ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy this conversation with Dr. David Rabin. Dr. Dave Rabin, welcome to the Thrive State Podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Dr. Vuu. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah, we got a chance to meet at the biohacking conference last year, and here I am thinking, this guy with aviator glasses has got some style, and the fact that he's an MD and in the science space itself, I need to know this guy. But before we dive into your story, there's a segment on the show called the 5 to Thrive. The audience knows it well. It's a game show style type of format here where I ask you 5 quick questions from the random question generator to get to know you a little better and potentially also guide some of our conversation. Each question is worth 1,000 points. If you win the 5 to Thrive, you get a healthy meal on me the next time we meet. So the next question to you, Dr. Rabin, are you ready to play the 5 to Thrive?
Okay, here we go. Question number one is, if you could trade lives with any fictional character, who would it be and why?
Any fictional character, James Bond,
Oh, yes.
obvious reasons.
Yeah, well, I mean, I see you as the next Bond guy for sure. 1,000 points there. Question number two is, what is the strangest food you've ever tried and surprisingly liked?
Strangest food. Oh, I guess the strangest food for me was probably raw shrimp when I was traveling in southern Italy, where this is like a customary thing to eat. And
Mm.
I grew up thinking that was like absolutely something that would kill you and you should never do it. And we went there, and all the old men, were eating like the fresh catch from the day, and I tried it, and it was actually amazing. It was something that these folks have eaten for generations down there because they just do it so fresh and so clean.
Oh, so fresh and so clean. 2,000 points, and I know where to take you for dinner when you win the Five to Thrive. Question number three. Here we go. What is the most memorable dream you've ever had?
I think my most, I mean, I think the most memorable the dreams that we have are often like really adventurous dreams or nightmares. I think for me as a kid, the thing that I remember the most was like flying dreams and swimming
Mm.
dreams. Those were really, really fun. And they felt so real. And just the idea that you could have those dreams really kind of, was interesting to think about. And yeah, and it was such a pleasurable experience that always stuck with me.
Yeah, I've had the same, and I'll be your wingman in your dreams anytime, Dr. Rabin. All right, question number four. 3,000 points thus far. He's about to win it. If you could have a superpower for a day, what would that be?
I think I would want to be able to move at the speed of light,
Hmm.
just to be able to move around the universe and see what's out there.
All right, the new Flash and James Bond together in one, and a Dr. Raymond. 4,000 points. Will he win it all? Is, how would Dr. Rabin like to be remembered?
I'd like to be remembered as somebody who contributed meaningfully to finding a cure for mental illness.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, that's beautiful, and thank you. And it looks like he has won the Five to Thrive, which means raw shrimp on me the next time we meet. He's going to be in his tuxedo Bond style, and here we go. Well, thank you for playing the Five to Thrive. Let's really dive into the work that you're doing, and certainly the invention you've helped put out to the market. We'd love to dive into the science there, but before that, was there anything that you wanted to be as a child, and how did you step into the field of psychiatry?
I think, going back to what you asked me earlier about dreams, I had these very, realistic dreams as a kid, and that, really stuck with me. And I think that asking my parents about what those meant, and especially when I had nightmares, and I think they were just trying to make sure that I wasn't afraid of sleep, and which I think was smart. They just said, "Oh, dreams aren't real, don't worry about it." But then as a kid, you keep having them, and so I asked the question, what if these feel this as real life, then maybe there's more to this word real, and we could start to think about what dreams are all about. And I never really found that much in about it other than the Freudian approach and the Jungian approach and these uh, forefathers of modern psychology, and psychiatry. But there's so much more to it than that. And there's also this Eastern approach to dreams, where yogis do meditation in their dreams, which is another totally different ballpark that's really interesting. And so starting to think of, so dreams are really like the original inspiration for me, and trying to figure out what that meant and what consciousness is, why we think about the world the way we do. And I never thought that I could actually study that, but then I started to, in about 2012, I learned about psychedelic assisted psychotherapy,
Mm.
and how that was transforming the way we treat PTSD and depression in early trials. And the trials were so promising and they were so well done that it made me realize that this was actually an opportunity to study consciousness in the field of psychiatry. And so that's kind of how I found that path.
Wow, amazing. So in 2012, were you already practicing as a psychiatrist at the time, or where were you in your sort of training or post training
Yeah, I was finishing medical school and medical school at that time.
Oh, beautiful. Let me ask you this. I mean, certainly I come from a background of radiology, interventional radiology, before I stepped into the longevity and performance space. And what I initially got into medical school for, in terms of helping people wanting to help, and I realized that sort of the disease models and structures in how we approached it from traditional medicine was a little off, and certainly didn't help me. As 7 years ago, I was overweight, diabetic, had high blood pressure, on several prescription medications, and really down that path. In the field of psychiatry, do you feel that sort of that traditional lens, and how we diagnose people with a DSM-4 might be a little bit off? And now, as you become a pioneer in the study of consciousness, uh, what have you found sort of surprising or disappointing in terms of how we've approached medicine, or at least mental disorders, in the past?
So it's a great question. I actually trained at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center and Western Psychiatric Institute and Clinic in psychiatry, which is where the DSM came out of. So this is highly inculcated in us as trainees to use this model. And I think what we've seen is that diagnostic model is really useful for clinicians to communicate patterns of illness to one another so that we can improve the way that we research and treat different illnesses. But when you actually look at the way that those illnesses present in the real world, most people don't just have depression and don't just have anxiety and don't just have PTSD. They have a blend of a whole bunch of those things. And there's no evidence to date to support the chemical imbalance theory in the brain, as a recent umbrella study showed, huge study showed out of I think it was University College of London, in over 100,000 people. We still can't prove the chemical imbalance theory.
Right.
So I think what that really justifies is, well, what else is contributing to trauma or to mental illness? It's trauma.
Right.
And traumatic experiences where we're basically experiencing one or multiple negative, or not, I shouldn't say negative, but one or multiple intense, meaningful, and threatening events where we're not supported thereafter, are effectively, can create these traumatic memories and experiences that can have long-lasting impacts on our mental and physical health. And that is what the studies are now showing, as we've suspected as clinicians for a long time, but that trauma and unprocessed, unresolved trauma is really at the heart of most mental illness.
That's beautiful. And, as you say that, I would love to have you on the mental health summit I'm launching in November. So I'd love to dive deep into that topic. When we talk about traumas, there's an ACE study coming out of San Francisco demonstrating really large traumas, right? Drugs in the household, divorce, physical abuse, emotional abuse, things of that nature. And we know how the more of those traumas you have, the more physical illness that we have. What we're starting to really understand are the more subtler cues that people might not consider as traumas. Would you speak to those, particularly maybe not feeling either safe, loved, connected, as you're growing up?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what it's all about, right? It's all about safety. So trauma, whether it's what we call like a big T traumatic event, like a single big event, or whether it's just being bullied as a kid in school or being by your parents in certain desperate situations and things like that, those are all traumatic events that build up over time, and they effectively train our bodies to to perceive threat from our environment when there is an early threat, and to not feel safe. And when we don't feel safe, what do? We do things to protect ourselves, right? So we put up thorns. Sometimes we're like more irritable. We're not as willing to let people in, and we're more closed off to relationships. We're generally more closed off to new things in general when we don't feel safe, right? Including positive health changes, because those are changes to our lifestyle. So it's like requires stepping out of our comfort zone to make a change, requires us to feel safe to a large extent. Even falling asleep, which is our single most important recovery state in our whole bodies, requires us to feel safe, because Sleep is our single most physically vulnerable state of being. We're totally off guard on sleep when we sleep, you know.
And speaking of that, we know of so many people that aren't falling asleep because they're thinking about all these things, you know, maybe in their businesses or their work and things like that. And it really kind of demonstrates how we as a human society have shifted our ability and what we find as safe or danger. They literally, because of maybe something at work or potentially even getting some social media, you know, response, is viewing it as literally potentially a saber-toothed tiger going to pounce on you when you fall asleep. Is that correct?
I mean, that's how our bodies perceive it because that part of our nervous system
Yep.
evolved over, you know, 100, it evolved originally probably like a couple 100 million years ago. So back in ancient mammals, they have the same core, that's why we call it the reptilian nervous system, because
Yep.
it's extremely old. And that system is just perceiving effectively safety and threat. It doesn't necessarily know that too many emails or too many responsibilities or too much news or too many screens is different from a saber-toothed tiger chasing us in the jungle. The nervous system actually responds in the same way, which means that it's taking all of our resources available in that moment and releasing them, giving them to our skeletal muscles and our heart and our lungs and our motor cortex of our brain and our fear center of our brain and all the parts of the body that are critical for getting out of a predator or lack of food, lack of air, lack of water situation, right?
Yeah.
An actual survival threat. So that's why tools like mindfulness and meditation and why we build tools like Apollo are so important because, and breath work, of course, because they help us retrain our brains to learn the skill of effectively attention control or mindful presentness. And that single skill, which has been taught by ancient meditators and yogis for thousands of years and is now being brought back in all these modern training techniques. This is the tool that helps us to navigate all that extra incoming stuff and sift through to focus on exactly what we want to get done and make happen.
That's beautiful. I love the fact that you say and want to dive into that science. And just to kind of reiterate what you said, it's, you know, our perception of the world, you know, potentially from our subconscious beliefs and our training put us in most of us in this state of a dysregulated nervous system where we tend to be more in the sympathetic. And what we've discovered is people that have perceived stresses, you know, activate gene complexes, many cell danger responses, leading to an upregulation of inflammatory genes, a downregulation in immunity genes, and that milieu or environment really causes the state of, you know, chronic symptoms leading to chronic disease, mental disorders being some of them, but also physical. You mentioned mindfulness, the ability to be able to really have the attention of not living in that reptilian brain, being more conscious of the state that we're in is very important. I certainly have incorporated, you know, meditation and breath work as being one of those super things. Tell me about the technology of the Apollo Neuro. I've tried it on myself in different settings, you know, and for anyone who's looked at it, it's a small device. I believe you're wearing it on your jacket there, that pulsates. Tell us about how this technology affects our nervous system and how that is used to help alleviate our states and potentially, you know, build that muscle of mindfulness.
So Apollo is a next generation wearable that doesn't track your body. It delivers soothing vibrations to your body that can improve your well-being.
This episode of the Thrive State podcast is brought to you by the Thrive State Accelerator. The Thrive State Accelerator is actually a home course that I developed using the exact same techniques I work with my celebrity clients, CEOs, and executives on how to get them to the Thrive State. The Thrive State Accelerator teaches you how to master your 7 bioenergetic elements. That's sleep, nutrition, movement, stress and emotional mastery, relationships, our thoughts and mindset, as well as purpose. In this Thrive State Accelerator, you're also going to get a bonus module on optimization. That's how I talk about supplementation, peptides, all the optimization techniques I use with my clients to get them to the Thrive State. Now, for some of you who are just joining us for the first time, you guys might be wondering, what is the Thrive State? Well, the Thrive State is actually the energy, the epigenetic environment we give to ourselves, telling our DNA how to act and how to respond. And if we want optimal health, longevity, and peak performance, if we can master these 7 bioenergetic elements, our ability to have those 3 things that we just said, optimal health, longevity, and peak performance, is at its greatest. And it also prevents you from getting chronic symptoms like brain fog, being overweight, feeling sluggish, acne, pain, all these chronic symptoms, as well as preventing you from getting chronic disease. So getting to that thrive state is really getting to that state to master being that very best version of yourself, so you could show up for you, for your family, for your business, everything that's important to you. So go ahead, check it out right now at kienvuu.com/accelerator and use coupon code podcast25 for 25% off. Now back to the podcast.
So it's basically music that we figured out from our research at the University of Pittsburgh in the Department of Psychiatry, how to compose for your body instead of your ears. So think about a time where you've had to give a big presentation in front of a lot of people, or you're about to perform in front of for a big event. You get stressed, and you put music on, it gets you in the flow, it keeps you in the zone, it helps you feel better. So Apollo does that through touch. And the vibrations that we developed at the University of Pittsburgh, there's 8 vibes that you can access through the app, and that syncs with the device, and the device turns on to help you effectively get into whatever state you're looking to get into in that moment, like music, but through your body.
That is beautiful. Now, some people go, man, all this, biohacking tech stuff sounds pretty woo-woo. But if we kind of consider this, we as human beings have been able to have an intuitive sense of our environment, to be able to take the light, the sound, the wind, the weather, to be able to predict what is going on. We've got this eerie sense. It seems like we have lost some of that. But if you start to think about how a lot of these tribal civilizations still act, I was just over with the Fijians, and they were just saying there's an energy of the air, and as well as how the trees are moving and vibrating, that they know a storm was about to come. They're very intuitive in that sense, and it seems like we've lost that. But if we kind of look at different type of energy frequencies, sound, vibration, light, or whatever, we as human beings have already developed vibrations and energy sources that give us different type of messages, correct?
For sure. Yeah. And we actually, like, just to your point, we are feeling machines. Like, we are born to feel as human beings. And the biggest problem that we face, also that's likely to be a big source of a lot of mental illness and suffering, is the fact that we deny our feelings, and we're taught to deny our feelings at a very young age. And a lot of the indigenous cultures bring people up to learn to feel their feelings and then understand them and acknowledge them and not judge them. And we, in much of Western society, we do a lot of feeling judgment. And so this creates like a suppression or a repression of feelings, because when we aren't allowed to feel them and express them, they actually get turned inward on us. And this is a lot of the work we do with our patients. So there's a way that we can help people feel safe using tools like breath work and soothing touch and soothing music and movement. These things that remind us that we're in control help us to remind us that we're in control of how we feel.
Beautiful. For those that have seen your device, it's sitting on right there. And, I remember reading the instructions. It can go on your wrist, it can go on your ankle. You've got it on your shirt there. How close did it actually have to be to your body for you to be able to sense the vibrations and the touch? I mean, it seems like, that device is kind of loosely on now.
Yeah, you can wear it through clothes. You can wear it directly on your skin. I wear it on my ankle at night because it's kind of out of the way. I wear it on my shirt during the day like this. And, as long as it's sound waves, so they're mechanical waves. So you just need to be able to feel the vibrations. We have people putting them in their pillows. We have people putting them in their pockets, clipping them to their undergarments, to their belt, things like that. So as long as you can feel it, That's all that really matters, because the feeling of it is basically the feeling of soothing touch that sends safety signals to our brain, just like somebody holding your hand or giving you a hug on a bad day. So that's what you're taking with what we figured out how to give you from the lab at the university, to be able to understand how soothing touch, and we evolved soothing touch to be this ancient safety pathway for hundreds of millions of years. Like in mammals alone, we've been nursing our young and forming direct contact with our young immediately after they're born to convey safety signals for a couple 100 million years. So these are well conserved pathways, just like the reptilian pathway. So what we figured out is you give these soothing touch signals to the body, it signals safety to the brain, and reminds us that we're safe enough to not actually to reappraise the situation, right? And then we realize, hey, that person who just dropped that bottle behind me that made a loud sound when I was checking out at the supermarket isn't actually a bomb going off, or it's not actually a threat, right? Or that traffic that I'm in right now is actually not going to kill me, but making a mistake in that traffic because I'm rushing will.
Wow. What an amazing technology. I also do know that Dr. Rabin, in a James Bond tuxedo, touching my shoulder would also make me feel safe as well.
You can only hope.
What have you found from a clinical standpoint do these vibrations actually do? Are you monitoring EEGs? Are you monitoring inflammatory markers? What's the research demonstrating at this point?
So we have inflammatory marker studies going on now, but we've done quite a bit of work on using EEG and EKG studies at the University of Pittsburgh, also like sweat monitor studies. This is like a fully functional cognitive neuroscience lab at one of the most advanced neuroscience labs at the University of Pittsburgh. And so you give people stressful tasks or different kinds of tasks. We give them stressful tasks, and then while they're all wired up to heart rate monitor, brainwave monitor, pupil measurement, physical movement measurements with cameras, and sweat measurements and respiratory monitor. And we're measuring all of that in tandem with how they say they're feeling and their performance on these tasks. And what we showed was that in a double-blind randomized placebo-controlled crossover study in 38 people, which is a large sample size, as you know, for a crossover study, that we showed that Apollo vibration statistically significantly improved heart rate variability within 3 minutes, which is the best sign of resilience under stress, because as probably most of your listeners know, heart rate variability goes down under stress, which correlates with poor performance under stress. And heart rate goes up under stress because our bodies think we're under threat, right? So if you do deep breathing, if you do meditation, mindfulness, or you deliver Apollo to the body during one of these very, very stressful cognitive activities, tasks that like NASA gives to astronauts before they go into space, then we improved cognitive performance of 25%, and that increased as heart rate variability increased in a statistically significant way within just 3 minutes, just by calming the body. So that's an amphetamine-like effect just by calming the body with soothing vibrations in a 3-minute time frame, and only with the Apollo vibrations. And meditation and breathwork, again, will do similar things for people, but most people haven't mastered those techniques to get to that level. So we were showing that we could do that without people having to actually master those techniques, which is kind of cool.
That's been pretty amazing. I have to say that for some people, it's really about sort of getting some assistance into the state first. Like I was a pretty bad meditator before. However, when I did breath work first, I've started to train my body, and now my brain understands that state a little bit better. So I could see how this tech is definitely conducive to be able to help those that haven't been able to get there as a gateway to be able for them to do some of this other stuff. This is amazing. I want to tap in a little bit about psychedelic work. How far are we from being able to see its uses in mainstream medicine? I'm certainly aware of a lot of underground use of psychedelics, some occasional uses If we consider ketamine a psychedelic in some clinical settings, but where is the science, and where is what's the legal situation for us being able to adopt it for more mainstream use at this point?
So that's a great question. And I was just going to say, you really nailed it with this idea of like feeling something so that it makes it easier to get there on your own. And that's what Apollo is doing. That's what psychedelics are doing, right? So psychedelic medicines, and we actually developed Apollo based on some of the mechanistic studies I was conducting on psychedelic medicines and how they work to induce these radical states of healing. And what we found was that, and what others had found as well, is that psychedelic medicines look like they're amplifying safety pathways in the brain, right? And this helps us feel safe enough and remember what it feels like to feel safe enough to be able to go back and reevaluate some of the meaning that we formed around these old, challenging, and often traumatic memories. And so once you know that you can feel safe in those kinds of situations, it reminds you that you can get there on your own. And then when we do psychedelic assisted therapy, the medicine is actually really amplifying the therapeutic experience of the safety that you build with us. So we have a physician, patient, clinician, patient relationship, and we're on a team, to get you the feeling better. And feeling better means feeling safe enough to allow the healing process to unfold. And so the medicine and tools like Apollo are really built to amplify that process within the existing therapeutic environment. And what's interesting about that is we see similar outcomes with lineage trained shamans in the jungle that we see with people delivering ketamine assisted therapy in the US and MDMA assisted therapy. Not exactly the same, but similar. And they're all treating trauma, which is really interesting. Ketamine is the only legal psychedelic at this point.
Yeah. As you mentioned that, I wonder, what you could speak to in terms of the default mode network. I know it's a very complicated, neural pathway, but it really does seem that many people are presuming this to be the seat of the ego, but also the thing in our youth that really is looking out for danger. So therefore, when it is on, you're basically in a program that's seeking out for danger all the time. It seems like breath work and some of the studies done on psilocybin has been used to quiet down the default mode network so that potentially you could basically, like you said, get to a point of safety. Is neuroscience really backing up the, major role in the default mode network in terms of playing a big part in these mental disorders and also, people not feeling safe?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is and it isn't. I mean, we don't want to overstate the neuroscience because I think that we often think that we make a mistake of attributing the cause of the problem to the network. The network is something that we all have, that every single person who's alive has a default mode network, which is really a pathway that our brains have learned to talk. Different parts of our brains have learned to talk. And that pathway of communication is almost, if you imagine, like it's like a ski run that's been really well carved into the mountain, and you've just skied down it over and over and over and over again, right? So you've built these really entrenched networks in your brain that we all have that are around, that are called default mode because they're effectively what we measure with an fMRI, and brain imager, live brain imager when we're at rest, looking at like a red dot on a screen. Right. So that's why it's called the default mode. But it's basically consistent, seems to be consistent with the almost like maybe not full-fledged like reptilian brain fear response, but perhaps more of the sense of I have to protect the parts of us that are involved in protecting our sense of self and ego. And so when in some of the studies that have been done by Rabin Harris and many others, that we've seen that medicines like psilocybin administered in the right context can actually result in a decrease in the normal default mode connectivity, meaning the way that these parts of the brain are talking to each other is not the way they're now talking to each other. They're talking to each other in different ways and more under the influence of psilocybin. And so it's like, if you think about the ski analogy, it's like having 8 feet of powder drop on top of the mountain as soon as you get up to the lift again, and then you can't remember what the path was that you took before. You basically just create a new path and explore.
Amazing work. Amazing work. What a great conversation. And I know the viewers have gotten something of it. And what a excellent technology to be able to bring into the market, to be able to help people with their nervous systems and really help in the mental health space. Now, before I ask my very last question, where do people find out more about Apollo Neuro and your work?
You can go to apolloneuro.com, APOLLONE.com, and you can also go to wearablehugs.com, which is what the kids call it. And Apollo is for the most part being used, and the way it is used is people use it for sleep and help regulate circadian rhythms. And I know we didn't talk about sleep that much, but I just want to make sure all the listeners remember that with everything else we're talking about, sleep, good regular quality sleep, and good circadian structure is at the foundation of all healing. So if we don't focus on that first and getting that at a decent regularity, then the other stuff just doesn't stick.
And let's just dive into a little bit more of that. How long do people need to be wearing the Apollo to notice a better regulation of their circadian rhythms and sleep?
So typically for changing your circadian cycle in general, with respect to Apollo or making any behavior change, it's usually about 3 weeks before we expect to see change in how you feel and energy levels and that kind of thing. And Apollo, I would say, is about 3 weeks for most people, but people tend to get the best results. If their results start to get real good and continue to be good around 3 months. So within 3 weeks, most people notice feeling better, feeling like they have more energy and feeling like during the day and feeling like they're able to sleep better at night. And then at 3 months, they're noticing much bigger differences. Like we see up to 30 minutes more sleep a night, 19% more deep sleep, 14% more REM, 11% increases in heart rate variability when people use it for 3 hours a day or more, 5 or more days a week for 3 months. And you can schedule it, turn on automatically. So you can just set it and forget it and it will do its thing for you, which is really nice.
Amazing. You make me really want to dig through my luggage and find my Apollo Neuro. How did you come up with the name Apollo? What's the story behind that?
Well, so originally we had like code names in the lab, and it was in, I think, 2017, we were trying to figure out what we were actually going to call the technology when we released it to the world. And we got together with a friend for Thai food with a bottle of wine, and we, stayed up for 4 hours just rattling off whatever names we could come up with. And Apollo was the very last name that our friend Al came up with. And it had a good ring to it. And we went back and looked it up, and Apollo is the Roman and Greek god of the sun and of medicine and sound. So Apollo gave the gifts of medicine and healing and sound to humanity. So we thought that was quite appropriate.
Well, that's pretty neat. I'm glad you shared that story here as well. Where do people find out more of your work? I know you're speaking at many different psychedelic mental health conferences all around the world, but how do people follow you?
You can find me at my website, drdave.io, and follow me on socials. It's always good to hear from you at Dr. David Rabin on Twitter and Instagram. And you can check out my podcast on Clubhouse at Dr. Dave. My show is the single source of truth for psychedelic news, which is called The Psychedelic Report. That's the first psychedelic news talk show.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, I can't wait to find out this answer from you, which is my last question is, well, everything that you've seen, experienced in your life thus far, and this answer could be as concrete or abstract as you want. What has been your best medicine?
I think my best medicine overall has been movement. And I know that I know that might sound strange to people who know me recently, because I'm still recovering from the sedentary life of medical school and residency. And just where you would completely lose your natural movement routine unless it's just because you're working so much that you just don't, it's very easy. I shouldn't say you don't, because I know people that do, but it's very easy to lose your exercise and movement routine, which I did. And so I've been spending the last 6 months really building more of a movement routine back in my life, and it's been endlessly helpful. Like, it's hard to describe how helpful it is when I get my heart rate up for even just 30 to 60 minutes a day.
Oh yeah, I could definitely feel it when I move or not move during the day. I could definitely see the James Bond body building in you, Dr. Rabin. Thank you so much for your time, for your wisdom today. Appreciate you being on the Thrive State podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Thrive State podcast. And if this podcast is bringing a lot of value to you, if you find that your life is just improving with this podcast, that your life is getting to the next level, please consider supporting it. And here's a few ways you can do so. You can do so by liking this video and commenting on this video, and also sharing this video with your friends and family. Another thing you can do is go to ratethispodcast.com/ThriveState. Go ahead and leave us a 5-star review there. It will really, really help this show grow. And this will give me more time so that I could actually give more content to you, just like you got in this episode. And if you haven't already picked up a copy of my book, Thrive State, Your Blueprint for Optimal Health, Longevity, and Peak Performance, you can pick it up now. It became a #1 new release in longevity. Go to thrivestatebook.com. And if you enjoy the book, please consider leaving us a review as well. And the last thing you can do, if you're liking everything here and you want to work more closely with me as well as my team to get you into the Thrive State, go to kienvuu.com/accelerator and consider joining the home course, the Thrive State Accelerator. It's really the course that I use. It's the concepts that I use personally when I work with CEOs, celebrities, and my high-profile clients to get them to the Thrive State. Again, the Thrive State Accelerator at kienvuu.com/accelerator. And because you're a listener of this podcast, I want you to save 25% by using the coupon code podcast25. I hope we continue to give value to you. And remember always, you are your best medicine.